We are at Spa-Francorchamps this weekend for the GT4 European Series. We welcome to the grid also cars from the Scandinavian Series, GT4 Scandinavia, and that means that it is an absolute monster grid that we have of 55 cars for this first 20-minute qualifying session, where it's basically about keeping out of trouble, I think. If you get any hint of a clear lap, it's going to help you. The teams have had a slightly strange weekend thus far. They've had 2 free practice sessions. The second was interrupted by full course yellows, people going off the road, and the first never really happened. They got an outlap on which somebody went off the road and took down about 200 metres worth of barrier. It couldn't be repaired in time to give them any running and keep the timetable on track. So free practice 1 results when published was purely an outlap, and that was that. So they're a bit behind the 8 ball in terms of mileage. However, let's see how they fare in qualifying. It's one driver, one session. It is David Addison and Ben Constanduros trackside, and in front of us, Ben, an absolute galaxy of cars.
Great to be back with you guys, and great to see the GT4 Series back on track, mostly supporting the European Series, but they did have a weekend in Misano, which actually ended up being a very different type of weekend for the GT4 Series than we've seen previously, because we have been very used to the Aston Martins being at the sharp end with great domination from Racing Spirit of Le Mans, a new team actually to the championship this year. But in Misano, the Mercedes found the temperatures much, much better, and the Aston Martins actually ended up overheating and retiring out of the races. So that has brought Mercedes back very much into the fray, especially the NM Racing squad.
And we'll see what Spa does, because really there's very little to go on thus far, because we've had so few proper laps set by anybody. The cars, not all yet out on circuit, but they are getting there. The car that created all the barrier damage of the other day is number 278, which was the GT4 Scandinavia Porsche Cayman of Gustav Bard and Patrick Skug. A new Cayman has been found, so they are back on track. Whether it's come from a team or whether it's come from RSR track days down the road, place your bet. But they found the car and they are here. Also, let me just quickly box off the fact that a couple of cars have got themselves 30-second stop-go penalties going into race 1. One of them is number 25, where Nico Verdonk drove, I think it was Nico Verdonk, in a Mercedes track day in the week here. And the other is number 34, the Sellerslag car, Olivier Hart, Alexandra Papadopoulos. You can't test before an event, and that was deemed as testing. So those cars have found themselves with these stop-go penalties. And you'd think, in a sense, really, the manufacturers would know the rules and know not to put the drivers in that situation. Yeah,
a remarkable situation, really, especially to begin the weekend with penalties. But we've seen plenty of penalties, whether it be from practice sessions, previous events, or indeed, well, that's a real miscalculation of just the basic regulations, not to go testing at the racetrack the week before the race. As you said, we've got this Scandinavian squad of cars. You can recognise them by their numbers because they start with 2. So all the numbers starting with 2, 3-digit numbers. They are the Scandinavian squad. We've got a couple of Mercedes, got a couple of Toyotas, one McLaren that we were focusing on, the Alfab McLaren 288. That actually took victory here in GT4 in a 24H series race back in April. And it now makes sense as to why they were here, because they were doing some extra practice for when the Scandinavian GT4 series, which is effectively Scandinavian GT series, a bit like in France. Scandinavian GT fell by the wayside when it was in GT3 configuration, but 2019 it was brought back into action as a GT4 category, and obviously difficult to build a championship through the COVID couple of years that we've had, but this very much their kind of big moment, I suppose, for their season, to have a flyaway event and drive all these cars from Scandinavia. Third round of their championship, having started the year in Anderstorp.
And one of the drivers within it, just to add to your air miles point, is from New Zealand.
Yes.
Because you've got Harry McDonald, who is a Kiwi, but races in GT4 Scandinavia, as one does.
Yes, interesting.
It's probably quicker to go the other way around the world, New Zealand, and pop up at the top in Scandinavia than it is to come all the other way to Europe, isn't it?
Especially if you have a race up in the north of Sweden. That is, well, as you know recently, we've both been to Sweden recently, it's a big old country.
Now, Victor Bouveng, who is one of those Scandinavian drivers, is the fastest, as you look there at number 22. Now, this is the teenaged Vincent Andronico, who has been a real gun this year. When we saw him at Imola, for example, at the start of the season, very, very impressive. He's also racing in the German series, and look at this, he's absolutely on a mission, isn't he? Carving his way through traffic. And Andronico, who is still being partnered by Andreas Mayel, he's going to be certainly a driver to watch in this session.
Another car to watch out for is the GT4 champions from Germany last year. We've got Gabriele Piana, the Italian, and Michael Schrey, run by Hoffer Racing by Bonk Motorsport, a catchy title. They are here as a bit of a one-off. We haven't seen them in the rest of the series, but they are German GT4 champions from last year. So expect them in their BMW to be at the sharp end, and Italian Gabriele Piana's got plenty of experience in GT4 cars.
He absolutely has, you're quite right. Vincent Andronico is either on for a demon lap or a huge moment here, because he's flirting with disaster up the curb through Blanchimont into the chicane. Victor Bouveng, former Audi factory driver, is the quickest, but not for long, because now Andronico goes fastest in the Cayman, 2 minutes 30.646. Now there is Michael Schrey in the BMW that Ben was talking about, the Bonk Motorsport run car, which he shares with Gabriele Piana, and we know that they are very, very quick. So yeah, another potential winning car, this.
The thing about these circuits, though, every time we do go to various different characteristics of track, it does tend to suit a certain brand of car, and as you say, usually through practice we get a feeling for what that brand of car is going to be, but because practice was, well, cancelled, and then even the second session was pretty interrupted, they didn't really have a lot, and sliding a little bit wide there. Love the fact that, by the way, that Spa has gravel traps now on the exit of corners. It's going to make a very messy 24-hour race, there's no doubt about that, but it does mean you can't just open the steering wheel and run wide if you have a little slidey moment like that. And I'm imagining that it makes it a particular challenge for these GT4 cars that don't have as much downforce as we see from GT3. They are reliant far more on their mechanical grip. And Michael getting himself out of the way after that moment. A good push in Sector 1, lost time in Sector 2. He'll lose even more in this final sector. Here it is again.
Yeah, so the McLaren wide ahead of him, Audi wider, and the BMW measuring its pace against those goes even faster and even wider, and yeah, rattles through the gravel. We were talking yesterday in GT3 track activity about the fact that they're like little rocks, those very, very sharp stones. So go off like that, you risk your own tyres, drag it back onto the road, you're risking other people's.
And also the edge of the curb, where the curb meets the gravel, over a longer period, and not necessarily so much of a worry perhaps for the GT4 cars, there will be a hole that will form on the back side of that curb into the gravel trap where that gravel gets removed. Catch that on your inside wall of your tyre, and you could easily get yourself a puncture just by coming back onto the track.
Indeed so, and it's going to be a drama over a long race if people are being a bit charismatic like that. Number 55 has gone to the top. That is Jean-Baptiste Mella in the Alpine. So, although you might have expected this to be a grunt-and-go circuit, the Alpine then up to the top of the times from number 5, the Team Spirit Racing Aston. The American driver Kenton Koch has gone second, and then third is the Toyota, number 8, which is driven by Etienne Shelley, the CMR run car. Julien Brichet is fourth, and this is the man that's fastest, and he's gone quicker again, Vincent Andronico. So now Porsche goes to the top of the times. Wide, yes, but top of the times.
Yeah, Vincent is certainly the one that has pushed the earliest, so has the temperature in his tyres. And I guess there is a real risk of these sessions having yellow flags or being curtailed. We still have quite a few cars yet to set a time at all, but certainly the brief from Andronico's squad was get yourself a quick time as quickly as possible, even if, yes, the circuit, well, on the one hand, the circuit might get faster because rubber gets laid down, but also could get slower because gravel gets dragged onto the track. And I think we saw that last night in qualifying for GT3, that the circuit actually degraded as the 4 sessions went on. So maybe a good strategy from Andronico to get those laps straight away. The likes of Kellner's Noah Andy in the number 7 Aston Martin, still not got a time from any of them, and Jim Platt, who we'd expect to see right at the sharp end. Yeah,
I mean, Jim Platt is out there, so it won't be long before he pops up at the top of the times, I wouldn't have thought. This number 66 Toyota is the other CMR entry of Antoine Potti and Romain Monti. And it is Antoine Potti behind the wheel of it, number 66. And that car currently is 9th fastest. I would have thought it would be higher up the order than that, to be honest. Antoine Leclerc now goes to the top with his Alpine. Hendrik Still, another very experienced racer, especially in GT4 cars. He goes 2nd. That puts Andronico down to 3rd, Mela to 4th, Koch to 5th, and Rui Meohas now is 6th fastest.
Antoine Leclerc was the 36 car was the fastest car in our 2nd practice session, not to be confused with Antoine Leclerc, brother of Charles Leclerc. This one is a lot older.
Yes,
than Antoine.
Who has been racing in GT cars going back to FIA GT1 days in Ford GTs, the Mark VDS cars. Simon Gachet then now up to 2nd fastest in his Mercedes, 2:29.099. And Jim Platt can't be far away from getting himself up to the pointy end of the grid, can he? Antoine Potti goes through, but falling down the order now as others are going quicker around him.
2 cars still in pit lane, or now in pit lane. And Adam Carroll in the 47 McLaren has been in the pit lane for 2 minutes, had got himself a lap but come back in. So has he discovered an issue with that car, or is he just doing any kind of tyre pressure changes, that kind of thing? You know, the lap is over, well, nearly 2.5 minutes long, so not many laps to get in. The other car is the number 80 machine, which is the AGS Events Ruben Lassart. Now, that car was one that was in strife in practice, so they've come out, they have managed to do a very slow lap, but now back into the pits, so perhaps trying to get themselves whatever problems they have found during shakedown, or shaking down the car in this session, fixed so that it can be better for Tom Verdier, who will take that car over in the 2nd session.
Yeah, so this is the sort of guinea pig session for that car.
When you've had an issue in practice and you've got to rebuild it to such an extent, you are going to effectively have to do a shakedown lap, even if we are in a qualifying session. And it seems as though they might have discovered an issue.
We've got 1 or 2 drivers that I would have a question mark over whether it's really them behind the car, because 1 or 2 so-called driver 2s, and Ruben Del Sart is one of them, being shown as being in Q1, which isn't necessarily how it is meant to be. However, in terms of the times, Leclerc to Gachet, 47 thousandths, Jim Platt 14th at the end of his first flying lap, so we know there's more to come out of him.
The other AGS Events vehicle, which is an Aston Martin, sorry, they're both Aston Martins, aren't they? Noah Andy back into the pits without setting a time. So it's not going very well for the French squad. AGS Events also own a plethora of Formula 1 cars that that you can rent for your pleasure and go driving around various circuits in France.
Okay.
If you wanted to drive a Prost AP01.
Is this AGS Events the same as the AGS Constructor of racing cars of years ago?
Maybe, possibly.
I'm not convinced it is, but that might explain why it's got Formula 1 cars at its disposal, because AGS Formula 1 cars were probably not worth a great deal in the end. Formula 2 cars that they built, maybe, but when they came into Formula 1, it wasn't necessarily the best of constructors. Anyway, we need to get your father onto the subject of AGS.
I was just thinking that. He's an OGS. An old grey.
So-and-so, yes. He was one of the few people that could trot out exactly what AGS stood for.
Yeah.
Now, Jim Platt is not getting himself up the order here, Ben. He's dropping down the order, which is not what we expect from Jim Platt. Andronico's last lap, incidentally, in the Porsche number 22, started really well and ended up in the pits.
Yeah, and his best lap actually is his 2nd lap out the pit. So even though he has done a couple of laps, that's detail I can't find on the screen, the actual fastest lap was still the first attempt, effectively. So that's quite interesting that even if perhaps you might be still getting pressure and temperature into the car, you are actually finding a track that is more congested and perhaps also dirtier. So that could also explain why Jim Platt's 2nd lap is the fastest. He's pushing on again, but there are cars out on track and there is gravel all over the place. And
that's Hendrik Still, who is 3rd quickest, backing out of it to let the traffic go. Then he doesn't get caught up behind anybody, coming then now down to the chicane. Can't really call it the bus stop anymore. Even the signage at the circuit has given up on the idea of calling it the bottom. It is just the chicane these days. Now, that is Noah Andy's car in the pit lane, but not only has an engine problem, it doesn't have a transponder that works either. So I don't think that's going to get out to do a time, is it? Because we've got 4.5 minutes on the clock, and if we get another half a minute done, he won't get an out lap and a flying lap in.
Is this to fix the transponder? That's exactly where you would find the transponder fitted to the car. And some can be battery powered and removed quite easily. Others are plumbed wide, hardwired into the car, which are much harder to fix. So I'm wondering whether it would be in the wheel arch around that bulkhead area where it would be. So perhaps that's the reason why they're not setting a time. But AGS have got some proper work to do with both of their Astons without times in this first session, and we've only got 4 minutes left.
Now this is the little Alpine that's been impressive in this session, number 55. It is the Autosport GP car of Jean-Baptiste Mella, Laurent Hergon will drive it in the second session. So these are drivers that are rapid in the French Championship, which also runs to GT4 regulations. But the Alpine, it's a pretty little car, but has been win-less this year. The other one to look for is the Konstantin Lachnauer Gus Bowers Aston, because that, of course, won 2 out of 2 at Imola and has been there or thereabouts pretty much all season.
Oh, we got a red flag.
Oh dear, with 3.5 minutes on the clock. So there's a car off the road. Gus Bowers, though, only 29th just to finish that point. And oh dear, at Speaker's Corner, by the look of it, with damage at the front, has gone number 66. That is Antoine Potty. And am I right in saying it's Speaker's Corner? I am. It has gone off and showered the road with gravel. And this is how he did it. Let's have a look. So turns in. He's chasing the sister car. He gets on the dirt, gets on the marbles. It's sideways, boom, and showers the road with gravel.
But he was nowhere near the apex of the corner. He was way wide, very, very early on. Curious accident there.
Yeah, it looked like he'd arrived a bit quickly on the wrong line, but then found himself on all the dust. We again last night in the GT3 track activity did find that if you were offline, it was really dirty, really dusty, and that seems to be where he put himself. So Antoine Potty, who is not inexperienced in strife. Now, there is just about time for an outlap, and for some, they can get a flying lap started. But whether they will be given that 3.5 minutes remains to be seen.
Such a congested timetable to get everything through. And Speaker's Corner looks so different from the TV perspective, looks so different from a driver's perspective. But I am told it's exactly the same white lines, that the layout and the circuit itself is no different. The surface is very different. It's much grippier, and that's why we're seeing times so much better, both through Eau Rouge, where they resurfaced there, but also in Speaker's Corner. But I'm told that the white lines are the same. Yeah. And the track length hasn't changed either. But it's so hard to believe when you look at the pictures, and I think maybe the camera placement's changed a little bit as well. It seems like there's much more of a kink on the exit now, and you've got all that space on the inside where they've constructed an extra part of the track for the bikes. And, of course, all the curbs around here are now, any curb that was aggressive has become flatter because, once again, with a 24-hour bike race in June, there's another one, a 6-hour race coming up in late September. And so the whole circuit has been mainly changed for that reason. So a very grumpy Antoine Potty you saw out of the Toyota. You've got there Max Tresoldi heading back to the pit lane. And it says here Q2 will start on time to be confirmed. Antoine Potty also loses his best lap because he causes the red flag. So it's a sort of double whammy here. It's to try. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, Renault used to do it, didn't they, in Formula Renault 2 litre and 3.5. But it's to try and get that message across to the drivers. Don't take risks. Don't risk going off and causing a stoppage. It's to try and harness everybody's attention on getting through without dramas. Well, yeah, number 66 Toyota then now drops to 25th on the grid. And the other question mark over it is whether it's going to be out for Q2, because it's got to be retrieved, gravel's got to come out of it, and then you've got to try and sort out the damage.
A car that's featured so highly last year in the championship as well. That partnership, so strong. And plenty of Toyotas in the field as a whole, thanks to Toyota Gazoo Racing Sweden bringing 2, and that's effectively a national works entry.
So there is the Toyota being retrieved, and the car is about to be hoiked out of the gravel. So you can see the front splitter's gone, and the Toyota dragged out of the gravel bed. Danger here is you don't want to do any more damage to the front of it, do you? So the front splitter gone. I don't think that's going to make it out for Q2, is it? You've also got the track to clear. Now, of course, bear in mind that if this happens in races, they're going to be long safety car periods. Here's another look. So you've got one Toyota, the Etienne Shelley car, that's okay, goes a bit wide, but if Potty was measuring his pace against it, finds himself on the marbles on the outside, and bang, and it was quite a hard hit, that.
He was nowhere near the apex or the racing line, was he?
No, didn't look like it. Etienne Shelley, just up the road ahead of Antoine Potty, had done a personal best in the first sector and was only really a couple of hundredths adrift of the absolute best of Vincent Andronico. Whereas, I can't really tell you about Antoine Potty's history of laps because the best one has gone, but he had also done a personal best on that lap on which he fell off the road.
Yeah, so it's dropped him down to 25th position
right,
then.
Yeah.
I mean, the times are so tight across the field that losing one time, and especially when you've only got a couple of laps in which to do so, in which to get laps in. A lot of the cars only managing 4 laps because the lap is so long. So,
well, those teams that are in the pits are taking the opportunity to do the driver change. We've not been told that Q1 will not restart, but I think a lot of the teams have sort of made their own arrangements here. For the sake of an outlap, they might as well write that off. We've done what we can do, because even if they do get a flying lap in, there's no guarantee that it's going to be any quicker. And then you've got to do an in-lap, all of which eats into the time before Q2 starts. You might as well just write off 3.5 minutes, get your second driver in now, get him settled, get him sorted, get him out on track.
I would agree for the top, say, 40 cars, but there are a decent chunk of maybe half a dozen cars that haven't really maximised their performance. The likes of Adam Carroll, 52nd position. Adam should be up in the top 20 at least, and maybe even the top 10 in that McLaren, but he's clearly found an issue with the car, brought it in, and hasn't been able to go back out. Actually, the timing screen's saying that he did 5 laps across the session, but clearly with some kind of a malady.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what, 10 seconds off the fastest time?
Something like that. 51, good to go when we go back out. The 2 pit lanes being used, of course, as you'll have seen, the Formula 1 pits at the top, the endurance pits at the bottom to make one long pit road to give the teams a bit of space. The Borusan Automotive BMW's there, the Becky Besler Will Burns car. Will was racing in GT4 last week in the British Championship, which is acceptable because he's a season entrant in that. It's not his fault. The championship comes to Spa. What they don't like is people dropping in and out and taking a one-off opportunity to go testing. So if we aren't to restart Q1, it will look like this, with Antoine Leclerc the fastest from Simon Gachet and Hendrik still third. Vincent Andronico fourth ahead of Jean-Baptiste Mella. Kenton Cox sixth from Louis Meyer-House, Etienne Shelley, Julien Brichet and Greg Gilver rounds out the top 10. Jim Pla only 15th, so he's going to be a man to watch, I think, when we go racing. And these cars will race for this grid because it's a separate qualifying session per driver per race. They will race at the end of today. I mentioned a little while ago that Gus Bowles was only 29th, so he's got work to do. Antoine Potty, as we both said, has dropped to 25th, so he too has got work to do. The best of those in GT4 Scandinavia, 18th fastest, and that is Daniel Roos, who again we used to see here in the 24 hours in the early days of what was then the Blancpain Endurance Series with his co-driver of today, Eric Behrens, but the Alfab racing car heading GT4 Scandinavia. Daniel Roos ahead of Michael Schrei, who was particularly energetic down at the Cours Paul Frere in the BMW. Nico Verdonk a long way back. Antoine Potty we've accounted for. Yeah, there are going to be quite a few hard luck stories really out of this qualifying session, but it does make for a really fascinating grid when we go racing.
It's going to mix up the championship as well, isn't it, to have so many of the names at the sharp end not featuring as highly as you would expect.
Ralph Kellener's 31st, Philippe Favre a long way back, Victor Bouveng, who was quick early on. I mean, yeah, there are lots and lots of good drivers that just cannot all be within the pointy end of the grid. So expect lots of shuffling when we go racing. So the clock's still with 3.5 minutes on it. We've not had a message to say that is the end of the session. Assuming it doesn't, then that is the order. Harry McDonald out of GT4 Scandinavia 48th. Adam Carroll a long, long way back in the Tim Whale shared Greystone GT McLaren clearly with a problem, and Alexander Hartvig is not normally that far down as well. So again, lots of people with a question mark over them. Now, Tom Verdier being shown as having driven the car in that session, but the timing screen showing it as Ruben Del Sart. So discuss. Anyway, that was Q1. We'll see what pans out for Q2 when the cars make their way onto the circuit in a few moments' time. The Toyota is out of the gravel, but now the track sweeping has got to go on. And again, just think about the length of time this has taken. Imagine this were eating into a race. It would be a good 4 or 5 laps of safety car. Let's look at the highlights then of that session that began with everybody pouring out onto the track, trying to find clear track space, which included the V8 Racing Chevrolet, Dante Rapponge at the wheel. Vincent Andronico was one of the first to absolutely get the cane above the scruff of the neck, hung it over the curves coming out of Blanchimont and went fastest, although in the end little good did it do him because number 22 got elbowed back down 2-4 way up the curve coming into the chicane at the end of the lap. We had the Mercedes of Jim Pla making progress, but he wasn't really helped by the red flag, and so Jim Pla only 16th, whereas Michael Schrei went rallycrossing coming out of the Cours Paul Frere. The dust hung in the air and he pounded his way up towards the chicane. Then the red flags came out after this drama at Speaker's Corner, off the road and putting the wipers on indeed. Antoine Pottier, a big hit and a very cross driver indeed out of the car. The damage pretty serious, and we expect that might miss Q2. So the tyre wall punching, such is the emotion of Antoine Pottier, knows it was his mistake, and Q2 is going to be next basically as soon as the road is clear of gravel. But that was quite a spray that came out of the gravel bed onto the tarmac.
Yeah, car removed from the gravel. Now gravel needs to be put back into the gravel trap.
That's right.
Doing a pretty good job there. But it's going to be dirty regardless of the fact that the actual stone's been put back in. It is going to be a very dirty exit to that corner.
I mean, you're right about these gravel traps, and I'm all in favour of them as well in terms of it does stop people abusing track limit, but it then has that knock-on effect if people do go off of interruptions. The answer is don't go off, but sometimes it's not as easy as that. Teams looking at the data, looking at the times about who did what to which and to whom in that first session.
Worth stating also that all 55 cars did at least start the session, even if 2 of them had to come straight back into the pits. We started the weekend with 55 cars. We had some pretty hefty accidents during our practice sessions, but the teams have got them, at least got them to a point where they could rumble out onto the track, even if AGS had to rumble back into pit lane pretty quickly with both of their cars with maladies. I think 2 different types of malady, perhaps.
Right, well, let's see now whether with different drivers on board, this is going to be a similar kind of session. The fastest time then out of that was a 2 minutes 29, and the timing screens are now being reset, ready for the second session to get underway. So down they all queue at the end of the pit lane. We await the session to start on time, the cars in the fast lane, and so we should be good imminently. With the green flag, Steve Burns, the race director, will give the call. And again, if you're first out, great, because you're in clear track space until you get to the end of the lap, and then you catch the stragglers that have left the pit lane.
Yeah, there is. I don't know whether there really is a sweet spot, is there? You kind of, yes, you could be 20th or something where you won't catch the slow cars, but then you'll have lots of cars around you. It's more about making the effort on that lap that you're out there to make sure that the cars around you are of similar pace, I suppose. Opportunity to see the newly resurfaced entry to Eau Rouge. One of the big things that they did change on the circuit when they did all these changes over the winter was they reinforced all of the area at the bottom of the hill and actually have raised it slightly so that there's less of a compression at the bottom of the hill, and you don't have the cars kind of the rebound from that compression. So you can actually see it looks different and it looks flatter, and that is helping drivers be much more confident through Eau Rouge. I spoke to James Baldwin, who obviously has no real experience of Spa at all. He said, I was amazed how easy it was. Really thought it was going to be much harder, and we're not seeing that big compression that we used to see where the cars would spark in the night because it's a gentler entry and with grippier tarmac as well. And was it hit last year where we'd had flooding in the April, we had like a little ripple effect where the tarmac had actually broken away underneath. And that obviously was causing real issues for the cars on that particular year. That was very much due to the flooding in the April. But no, it's at the moment, it's very, very, apparently very nice to drive.
There you go. Green flag is waved. Out they come. I'll tell you what, it didn't feel much flatter running up it the other night. It still felt as steep as ever. So the green flag is waved. The cars now accelerate out of the pits onto an out lap. 20 minutes does not give you many laps, does it? So, you know, you really do have to be on your toes here. And yeah, I think you ideally want to be up near the front of the queue, and you're seeing it from one or two of the quicker drivers, because in the Pro-Am cars now, it's the turn of the Pro, they're letting the traffic go a little bit, just by themselves, 4 or 5 cars lengths.
Yeah, and I like the approach that we saw from Vincent Jonico. Go hard straight away. Don't waste time. Don't try and spend laps and laps trying to find space, or if you've made a small error, backing off to go again. I think you just have to go, and if there are errors in that lap, then so be it. But there's no time, because we could easily get another situation where the session is red flagged early, all gets dirtier, and therefore the track gets slower. Jim Plash should have been right at the sharp end of our qualifying session in Q1, but he started his session late, and I think that really didn't work out for the Mercedes.
So drivers trying to get some warmth into tyres, heading out onto the circuit then. And we don't expect to see number 66, so it means that if it's fit to race, it's for this race going to be at the back of the grid. Romain Monti will have a lot of work to do. It's just like a constant stream of cars, isn't it? 88 Mercedes there. Stanislav Savronov has given way to now Julien Lambert. Sorry, to Alexander Weintraub, I should say. Comes out of a newly cleaned speaker's corner. You're right, it does look so different with that motorbike track on the inside, but the actual corner itself hasn't changed.
I think it's this angle that really fools me, because that kink there, I'm sure it didn't used to be there, but it must have been there.
It was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just more pronounced now.
Yeah.
I think also part and parcel of it is that 1 or 2 camera positions have had to change, so that gives you a slightly different perspective in certain corners as well. Right, so then the start of the next lap is going to be the interesting one, because that's when people are going to go for a time. Right now, there's this almost rolling roadblock, this whole queue of cars trickling down towards the Cours Paul Frère.
Opportunity for the drivers to have a look at track conditions, see which corners might have a little bit of gravel on the exit where people were pushing too hard last time. In theory, in that stoppage, all of the marshals from around the track will have been sweeping all the exits, so it should be a pretty well prepared circuit right now, and obviously then it'll now develop as we go through the session. But I think it's a big job for the marshals this weekend. I was chatting to Chris Humphreys, who's a marshal down at Les Combes, English, travelling over here for the weekend, one of many English marshals, and they are at any given opportunity out there sweeping the debris off the circuit to make sure the track is as clean as possible. And
again, if there's an interruption because there's a car off at turn A, but there's gravel at turn B, that'll be swept as well under that period. So there'll be a general sweep-up operation. Right, let's look at lap times. We've got 1 or 2 diving back into the pit lane, I notice, in the background. But Gabriele Piana then takes over that number 2 BMW. Got a pack of highlighter pens running together here as the Mercedes stream uphill, absolutely together. Get your sunglasses on as the 2 yellow perils go side by side up towards Les Combes.
I wonder whether the car we saw in the background was the McLaren that was with Adam Carroll and now would be with Timothy Whale.
No, I think it was Fabien Michel's Audi, in fact. So that's bailed. Tim Whale, I think, did carry on. Right, so Mercedes 2x2, Alpine 2x2, and Andreas Meyer, number 22 Porsche, does the best of anybody thus far within the first sector, heading up then to the Les Combes section at the top of the hill. Laurent Hergon now in the Alpine. That was the car that we saw Jean-Baptiste Mella going well in the first part of qualifying for the first race, the race today, which is going to be an interesting one, isn't it? Starting as it does at 8:05, so it's going to go into dusk, and if things are running late, might be dark by the end of it.
Yeah, which also means with this strange weather we have in Spa, which is kind of warm and sunny, that actually they'll be experiencing quite different conditions as well, because the coolness of the air comes in at that time of night, and suddenly they'll then have to look at different tyre pressures to try and get the tyres working as quickly as possible. They're actually being quite gentle at the moment, aren't they, at the start of this session, not pushing too hard too quickly. on these tyres to take away the energy from them straight away, but they might have to be a bit more aggressive when we come to this evening. It's not cold, but it's fresher, certainly, than the days.
All things are relative, though. Compared to most Spas,
yes,
it's positively balmy. Jean-Laurent Navarro, number 138 Mercedes, he's taken over from Le Patron, Julien Brichet, coming now up towards the left at Blanchimont. And at the end of this lap, as I say, we'll start to see proper lap times because it was an out lap only really last time through. So, you know, that takes out 5 minutes or so before you get any sense of a time yet. Dust kicked up at Blanchimont.
I fear.
Did it survive?
Well, he was shooting across the circuit with the gravel being kicked up, so I fear that car, he might have got away with it.
Okay, I'm looking out of our window as best I can over to the chicane, where traffic is coming towards the chicane, but slowly in a red flag. So I think that's just answered our question. Red flag is out. So it's coming down from Blanchimont exit into the chicane. You just picked up Loic Villiger there.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because in the chicane, you want to go quite slow through the chicane to set yourself up well for a good exit to start your lap. So the last place where you can feel the car to understand if you've got full pressure is Blanchimont, which is basically flat out. But if you haven't got the grip in the tyres or the pressure in the tyres, then it isn't flat out. And suddenly you pick up a bit of understeer. Last 10 years or so, then you just open the steering and run across the exit concrete and tarmac. Now there's a gravel trap there.
Yeah.
So you're in the gravel trap and then you lose the car, and I'm not quite sure where that car ended up. But I think it might have been on the opposite side of the track to where the incident started.
Which is what we saw last year in one of the Super Trofeo races, wasn't it? It was Noah Walt that had the similar incident. As you say, there it is. It's hit the barrier and bounced back onto the circuit. So that car is most definitely going no further in this session. And the car's run wide. So in a minute, expect to see it come spearing across the racetrack. There it is. And bang. And I think that was a Cayman, wasn't it? Is that 22? Is that the Mael Andronico car? So Andreas Mael has absolutely wrecked the car that was, what, fourth in Q1 thanks to Vincent Andronico.
Yeah.
So he's out of the car and all is good, but Andreas Mael has had a hard hit, and I can't necessarily see that car being au point for this afternoon.
No, because there isn't even tyre barriers to protect that concrete wall, so that is a hard hit.
And Mael is not inexperienced, as we've discussed in previous GT4 races. You know, he's an experienced driver. He's done a lot of miles around the Nordschleife particularly. So to be doing something like that is a surprise to me. So, because it's qualifying, the clock stops and the cars will head to the pit lane, the circuit will be cleared, and then we'll go back out again. But it is giving rise to the fear now that the races are going to be rather interrupted as well.
Well, we saw the same thing in Imola, didn't we?
Yeah, true.
Because there's so many cars on track as well. We had a great entry in Imola, if you remember. Again, an unforgiving circuit, and I think it's right. So many of the circuits these days have become so forgiving. Yes, it keeps us able to keep racing, but it should be a challenge to be a racing driver. It shouldn't be easy. And Spa's supposed to be one of the hardest tracks in the world, and I think it got easier with all the runoff areas as they were. Even if it is the motivation has come from bikes to do so many changes, I think it's good. Although it is annoying to have to fill red flag periods.
Well, there is that as well. Yes, the risk of being selfish about it. Very few had got a time in, had they, just before that red flag came out. So we'd only had 4 cars really doing a proper lap. So what we're going to end up with,
not really representative lap times, are they?
No. So what we're going to end up with is a 10-minute qualifying session, because you lose the first 4 minutes effectively by doing an out lap and getting onto a flyer. So by the time you're starting to do times, there's probably going to be about 10 minutes on the clock.
So the AGS Aston Martin of Hugo Condé did go out onto circuit. That was the car that Noah Andy brought into the pits and didn't do much with. They've notified it still doesn't have a transponder, so if they were trying to fix the transponder issue in Q1, they didn't, and they are now trying to get it fixed. Well, no, he just took the car out, and now a bit more time perhaps to try and fix it. But the 80 machine, their teammate, did not go back out onto circuit. So whatever issue they have with that car, possibly a legacy from their crash in free practice, it is playing no further part.
Nor, of course, did number 66 Toyota go out. So right now, you've got cars coming in. You're not yet allowed to leave to drive down to the end of the pit lane because the fast lane is not open. The Borasan Automotive BMW of Jason Tahincci-Oglu comes back in, former British Formula 3 Championship racer when he was Jason Tahincci, but he's gone back to the family name. His father, regular steward at Grand Prix, part of the Turkish Motorsport Federation. Door opens. That was the car that Jagish Gaidik drove in Q1, and a bit of fresh air into the car while we have this stoppage. There are course cars blatting in every direction now to try to get to the incident zone and get the car out of the way and get the circuit cleared and make sure that the barriers are good, ready for the resumption. We've also got cars speeding in the pit lane being investigated.
Whoever is in charge of that speed gun this weekend is very, very militant with it.
No, you're not wrong.
We've plenty of cars in the GT3 qualifying with speeding in the pit lane infringements.
By 0.1 of a kilometre of an hour, but it's still over. You know, it's 50.1, it's 50 Ks, you're done. And there's a lot to get in on the timetable today because we've not only got GT4 qualifying, we've got them racing later on, we've got the 30th anniversary race, we've got Lamborghini Super Trofeo, we've already had a Formula 4 race, we've got Formula Regionale as well. So there's a lot going on, plus Super Pole, which will determine the top 20 on the grid. Oh, and there's the warm-up for the 24 Hours of Spa. What have I missed, Ben? There's and esports off track as well.
Yeah.
On it goes. So
and the press conference starting in about 20 minutes.
Oh, that's right, Stefan Rattel's annual press conference, yeah. So there is the Tim Whale McLaren that you looked at a moment ago.
Yes, I had got out to track.
Yeah, it had. So all the teams now itching to get on with this, but there's still a big gathering of circuit vehicles down on the run to the bus stop.
This will also be a help to the Audi that came into the pits of Fabien Michel, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Obviously with an issue, there's no reason why you would come straight into the pits after one single lap. So whatever that issue is, they've got now more time to try and fix it.
Number 9 ready to go, which is the Hella Padgett Racing 1 car. Ralph Kellener's drove, and Christian Gysi will take it over. That's a Pro-Am entry. They drove an Audi together last year. Ralph Kellener's broadcaster for Eurosport Germany and formerly a Toyota factory driver at Le Mans, going back to the previous Toyota factory effort about 2 decades ago. And his father, Helmut Kellner, is, of course, a hugely successful sports car and then touring car racer, European touring car champion. Laurent Hergon's Alpine for the Autosport GP team, ready to go.
Yeah, he's one of the development drivers for Renault and for Alpine, so does a lot of work on the performance side of all of your Renault road cars. Laurent does. Partnering Jean-Baptiste Meller, who was the champion of the Alpine European Cup last year. So that is actually a very strong squad, those two.
Well, they know Alpine's inside out between
yes,
them,
exactly,
don't they? Yeah. We are 5 minutes away from the estimated restart time. Number 6 is the other Hella Padgett Racing 1 entry. That is Moritz Gysi. So you've got Christian Gysi, then the two sons go out in the other car. It does show the success of GT4, though, doesn't it? You know, this huge entry of Europe, plus the Scandinavian championship put onto it.
And just all the different brands as well.
Absolutely. Different
colours of the cars, different designs of the cars, and you know they're not all designed to one spec as well. They all have to be balanced to make them performant. That's fascinating. There's actually 2 types of Alpine as well. There is an Evo version that we see with the top teams like Autosport GP, if you want to put your French accent on. And then there is the first iteration run by some of the other guys as well. So we've got 2 types.
And there's the Aston Martin car park up at the top of the pits with the number 18 Team Spirit Racing car. Comes out of the Hella Padgett Racing 1 stable for Marcus Lundstrass and Henrik Pedersen. I keep meaning to ask you this, but we've also got, of course, the Astons run by Racing Spirit of Le Mans, which is spelt completely differently from Le Mans. It's one word. What's all that about?
Because Le Mans is the French name for Lake Geneva.
Right.
And Spirit of Race Le Mans were previously known by a different name, racing in Le Mans, but spelled differently.
Right. Okay.
The team actually originally run by Nicolas Lapierre, before he then went off and established Cool Racing with one partner, and the other partner stayed on and changed the name and continued with this. So they're actually the two teams based within 15 minutes of each other, within about half an hour of where I live.
There you are. Thank you. I knew you'd know. You've just seen what's left of the Allied Porsche being returned. Now there's a bit more track sweeping to be done, but the fast lane is open, so the cars can make their way down the pit lane. But yeah, a really surprising incident that for Mile, who, without being flippant about it and saying he should have known better, you know, he's an experienced driver, so I am surprised that he got himself into that jeopardy. Yeah,
absolutely, on that first lap, asking too much of the car.
So we will be good to go in about 2.5 minutes' time.
Why do drivers have track maps on their steering wheels is something that always comes up in simple. Do they not know where they're going?
Exactly. It's all to do with corner numbers.
It's also with corner numbers and communication with engineers, so they can say, turn 5, I'm having this. Turn 7, the car is doing this, and there is no. But it's not called Bruxelles. It's called Fagnes, and it's not called camping. It's called karting, and the confusion of the names, especially here at Spa. There's probably an hour's worth of discussion we can have about corner names around this circuit. And so instead of having corner names, they use numbers, but we like to still call them by their proper names.
But equally, of course, the message from race control is numbers, so you have to marry those up. But you're quite right, yes, certain circuits only have corner numbers. Other tracks have sponsored corners, but I could never get my head around VIP Pet Foods Corner at Bathurst. It just, no, it wasn't for me. Right, we are about 1.5 minutes away from getting underway now, but yeah, Ben's point is absolutely valid. They've all got the little track map, so that if the engineer says, be careful of track limits at turn 5 or an incident at turn 9, he can look at that and instantly know exactly what part of the circuit is being referred to. And on a long lap like this, where you've got 19 corners, you know, it does take a little bit of remembering, I suppose.
It's always just a shame that when newer tracks are built and then they don't name the corners and they just leave them as numbers.
Yes.
That's sad for us.
There was a conversation in a press conference at the first Valencia Grand Prix on the street circuit all those years ago about corner numbers. Where your father tried to entertain Fernando Alonso in the story of Nicker Brook at Alton Park. And Fernando Alonso's face, I've never seen anybody look quite as glazed as your dad tried to explain Nicker Brook to him. The green flag is imminent then, and this will get a somewhat shorter Q2 underway with, like I was saying a few moments ago, really 4 minutes or so are going to be wiped off this by the need to get the cars on the circuit and finish an outlap, and then we'll be in business for some proper lap times. But again, I mean, really, this is a bit throw it all up in the air and see what comes down again, because
and with the extra pressure of having less time, you need to get suddenly now there is no time to dilly-dally. You need to get those laps in straight away, and that extra pressure. A lot of these drivers, the Pro in the Pro-Am, for instance, but still, they might not be necessarily seasoned professionals. They might be single-seater drivers that have just done a couple of seasons of high-level single-seaters. So it is a bit of pressure. There's a Mercedes there with its bonnet still open, so that's not going anywhere for the moment.
But look there, Gabriele Piana then lags back, lets the traffic go. Now there's an experienced driver, be it GT4, GT3. He knows how to do this. He might not get a clear road, but he might get a few lengths, and that's all going to be very, very important to him. So out we go. And it's 87. Now, that was the Jim Pla Mercedes, which is now Jean-Luc Bobelic. And that car is with a problem, clearly, and that would explain in part why Jim Pla wasn't quicker in Q1.
And why perhaps he didn't get his lap in straight away. Look at the gap that Gabriele Piana's created for himself. None of the guys behind obviously want to push on and overtake. He'll keep a decent pace. He's just got to hope. I think there's not that many cars in front of him. He's just got to hope that those don't back off too much. And he's got himself a lovely little gap in the traffic that few else have got.
So the circuit now very, very busy. Others will try, like Piana has done, to get themselves on clear track space. The clock ticks on down.
The problem is I don't think you can afford to not push and not get the car up to temperature on this lap. You need to get some kind of energy through the car to make it work for, what, 2 laps you're going to get? Maybe 3 if you're in the right part of the track.
We've just seen 298, which is the Joachim Walder BMW M4.
Yeah, even in the Scandinavian series, they still have a decent array of vehicles, despite the fact they've only got a small grid. Great job.
Yeah, Daniel Roos and Eric Behrens have been the Pro-Am pace setters. They've had 3 wins, 1 win to Victor Boveng and Joachim Walder, and then in the Am class, 2 wins to Fredrik Danner and Per Andersson, and 2 wins to Gustav Bard and Patrick Skog. Right, number 36 Alpine then heads into view. Loic Villiger at the wheel of it, and he's found an Audi to play with, which will now be the Fabien Machal car.
One very curious thing that we've seen this year in GT4 Series is that both races have been won by the same crew on each individual weekend. So the first weekend we had Racing Spirit Le Mans in their Aston Martin. Pro Sport then won in their Aston Martin both races at the second round of the championship, and in Misano last time out, both races were run by NM Racing. I don't really see that that's going to be possible here. I don't know why I feel it's that way, but there's. It seems if you get the sweet spot, you get the sweet spot.
Well, given the size of the entry, as you say, it is a big, big surprise. So let's see what pans out. The Alpines ought to be quick around here. There's always the element, of course, of a bit of pot luck in traffic after the pit stops. There's also your co-driver's pace, and perhaps more so than anywhere, there's also that need to stay on the road, and the Loic Villiger Alpine does not by going wayward there up through Eau Rouge. You could see the car start to get nervous, and eventually the only way to let it go was off the road and back on again. So at the moment, we do have a time to chase, a 2:35.3. We'll get them below that, I would have thought, without too much drama. Simon Thurman, it was, that was the fastest in his first run, the silver driver in the Alpine that he shares with Pierre Sonsinena.
And plenty of almost instantaneous track limit warnings for Raidillon. I don't know whether they've now installed sensors at the top of that hill rather than a marshal having to call it in, but as soon as we saw that happen, it pinged up on the timing screen as track limit violation, lap cancelled. So there might be an automated system up there now with so many Formula One tracks adopting that system. That will at least, well, number one, it will stop the need for a marshal to stand there reporting every single number in, but also will mean even in night sessions at the end of our GT4 race where visibility is limited because it's dark, we might still see those track limit infringements coming through. Previously, drivers knew that there was a marshal out there until a certain period of time. He was then going to find it harder to identify what car had made that infringement, and almost every night session you'd hardly ever see any track limits, whereas during the day you'd see quite a few.
You just couldn't police them, could you?
Yes, no, exactly,
I don't know that there is a automated way of doing that. I do know that there is a team of 20 people in race control purely for track limits.
No.
Now, whether or not that's for GT3 only or for all races, I couldn't tell you, but certainly for the 24 hours, it's 20 people, and it is still a manual operation. The pro cars in the 24 hours carry this 3D timekeeping, so they know when they've gone off the road, but that isn't part of the track limit penalty process. It's really for information at this stage. It's still being done by this team of volunteer officials. Good luck to them, because they are going to be generating some paperwork. Right, let's get back to GT4. Ivan Jacoma is the fastest, 2 minutes 30.972 in number 718, Cayman 718, with another of the Porsches, that of Moritz Wiskirchen, second. And then the best of the Scandinavians, which is aboard 208 then. Now, Per Andersson, third quickest.
And already only 8.5 minutes left on the clock.
Time flies, that's for sure. Right, now to the top has gone Hugo Sasser, who has done a 2 minutes 30.947 in the Aston Martin.
Kenny Hermans has brought the Camaro back into the pit lane, so that's a shame. This is definitely not the moment you want to have an issue with the car and not be able to get a lap time in, because less and less opportunity for laps now. The 87 Mercedes is out on track. Jean-Luc Bublik. We saw with the bonnet up, as is the number 7. So Hugo Condé, even if he doesn't have a transponder working, still getting the laps in. But yes, no sign, as we reported earlier, from the 80 or from the 66.
So Simon Thurman was the fastest before the stoppage because he got a lap in just before the flag came out. Gabriele Piana, though, now, Ben, has done the absolute best within the first sector in the number 2 BMW. And Konstantin Lachnauer going better than Gus Bowers was able to go. He's arguably found a clear bit of road, really, to go third fastest, make that fourth, because Enzo Juliet now goes top for Mercedes, the NM racing car, 2 minutes 30.668.
And it's not very nice, is it, where they've cleaned the track and you've got to pick up a load of dust just before your braking zone. There's no time, really, for the tyre to clean itself before you then are asking quite a lot of it to get the car slowed down. Thurman goes fastest into the 29s now, as I saw Jean-Luc Bublik bring the 87 back into pit lane. So that is going to look as though it's going to start at the tail end after Maladies for the 87 machine.
It's not done a lap, has it? Hasn't got a time. So clearly all is not well. You're absolutely right. Simon Thurman then, 2:29. 0.8 of a second quicker than anybody else. That's quite a margin. Now, we saw him in traffic. He's still in traffic. I was wondering whether it might have helped him to get a tow. I'm not convinced it does. It's Ivan Jacoma's Porsche ahead, which is a quick car. Look, Villiger has now made it 2 Alpines in the top 2. He's gone second. Number 36. And number 5, Aston, on a mission as well here. So that car is Timon Nabour's, yet to do a lap time. So this could be quite an interesting one. Again, big flash of the headlights to say I'm quicker, let me by, but everybody at this stage looking after their own times. There's Hugo Condé, who also, for Aston Martin, the AJS Events car, that also should be a quick car.
I really like the positioning of where Simon Thurman is at the moment behind Giacomo, as you say. Giacomo's should be very fast, but actually both of them have set slower first sectors than they have done previously. So this is potentially not going to be an improvement. Was that just a lock-up we heard, I think?
Yeah, I don't think anything's happened to risk a yellow flag. So Konstantin Lachnauer heading up towards the timing line as the Alpines currently hold sway, but Lachnauer goes through.
Slow lap there.
Yeah, 29th being shown as. And there is the Jean-Luc Bublik car, Jim Plar in the background, looking all rather concerned about this, but the Acodis ASP team entry in real strife.
Interesting place that they're working on there. They're just beside the door area. They're not in the bonnet.
No.
Usually if there's an issue, it's the bonnet area which you would be investigating. So it could be a curious issue for the 87.
Fabien Machal briefly was 4th. Will Burns' BMW has now gone 4th. This car had done the absolute best in the first sector, but has lost time in the middle. It is about 11/10 slower than it needs to be in the middle sector of the lap. So Gabriele Piana should be an improver. 19th he is, as the Toyota, the surviving Toyota of CMR, gets all sideways ahead there. And that gets Gabriele Piana on the lights, doesn't it, as he comes down towards the chicane then. So the M4, which has been the championship winning car in silver in the past, comes up towards the timing line now, ready to break the beam. And Gabriele Piana will go through to do what? He will go 5th fastest. So yes, it was a good lap for him. 5th, Gabriele Piana. That was a 2 minutes 30.700. So good lap by Piana. Also Enzo Juliet had done the best of anybody in the middle. So the lap time's still coming down. That's Will Burns, the GT4 champion in British GT last year, former British Touring Car Championship racer, and probably the only person we can link out of the entire weekend, I put my head on the block in saying this, that started off in the Castle Combe Saloon Car Championship. In something raggy like a Peugeot 106 or something a long time ago, but Ginetta champion, GT champion, really quick driver is Will Burns. We've got a pit stop infringement that's been noted against the Gustav Bard Patrick Skog Cayman.
Konstantin Lachnauer has had his times taken away from him, so that he is now at the very tail end of the field, that number 10 Racing Spirit of Le Mans. So we've seen times from them.
Yeah.
But at the moment, well, 50th position effectively.
Yeah, just looking at the message screen, you're right, he has seemingly lost all of them. The most recent one has gone, but that might be the only one really that he had against his name. So you're right, Lachenau's got to do it all over again, and he's only got 2 3/4 minutes in which to do it.
And he has done now, but it's not been a particularly good lap, has it?
He's on the track again, but he's not yet broken the beam, I don't think. Will Burns heads into the chicane, so Alpine, Mercedes, BMW, Audi, Fabien Marchal 6th, Burns bails, that's the end of it for Will. So he's done a time, he's up near the front of the grid, there's no point taking the life out of the Pirelli rubber, save those, keep those for the race. And remember that this is the grid for tomorrow's race that we're talking about, so they race into the night, or into the evening today, and then they get the cornflakes race tomorrow morning.
I mean, what a weekend for the mechanics also. If anything happens in that first race, they are assured of a long night to get the cars prepared for effectively one of the first races of Saturday morning. That is, that's a brutal schedule for them.
Yes, because they race at 5 to 10, and they'll be on track, you know, just before then. So yeah, it is brutal to say. Right, this is Lachenau, and this is the lap that counts. So he's done his out lap.
So that last lap didn't count either.
But that was his out lap, wasn't it?
But it didn't count. It hasn't even got a lap at all. He's now done...
Depends where he was in the pit lane, though, because if he pits wherever the timing beam is,
true.
It wouldn't necessarily reflect as a lap time. It would include the pit stop.
Yeah.
So...
Seems like with only 1 minute and 15 seconds remaining, it seems as though he should have had at least one lap on the board, even if he had one lap removed.
I agree with that, yeah. Well,
got to tidy it up.
Here we go. There's him, there's Andreas Mayel without a time, but we know why, and there's Jean-Luc Bobelik without a time, and we know why. So Lachenau comes through.
Yeah, because Condé was also part of that group, and he did get a lap time in last time. Only 29th position, though, for the 7th.
But Lachenau was being shown as having been in the pits for over 10 minutes, which I would also argue with, actually, because...
I think if you delete a lap time, then the timing screen gets confused and thinks you've just been
in the pits.
Invisible, yeah.
Right, okay, especially if it was his lap. Alpha
oh, and there we go, he's off track.
That's not going to help at all, is it? Right, look to the timing screen.
Well, hang on, he's got to get to the start-finishing line before, well, he will do just about here.
So car 27 has lost a lap. We're waiting to see the next thing for number 10, and he's got caught up in traffic. So Konstantin Lachenau, I mean, more than anything, he just needed a lap time, a banker lap. Through he comes, but he had to back off at the chicane anyway. So through he goes. He's up to 25th, whoopee, if that lap survives, but he's got to do another one here. There's number 15 of Enzo Juliet, that was third, is now fourth, because Erwin Bastard in the Audi number 14 has gone second, the car that he shares with Rui Meohas. The flag is out. Haven't yet seen anything about number 10 losing a lap, or another lap at least.
Which is curious, because we saw exactly the same thing by the number 8 Toyota, and that pinged up instantly, didn't it?
Anyway, let's hope for Lachenau's purposes he survives all of that, because he needs a lap. He needs to go even better. Here comes Juliet towards the line, stays fourth fastest in the Mercedes. Gabriele Piana pitted at the end of the last lap, so he's not going to be a challenger. But the stewards are going to be busy with all of these penalties and track limit warnings. And when we get to the race, you know, it could be that we get stop-go penalties, time penalties, and as ever, the result over the line has to be kept with a certain amount of salt because penalties post-race will change it. Quite a lot bail for the pits, and this is another of the big talking points. The Jim Pla, Jean-Luc Bobelik Mercedes. Jean-Luc's in the background in the blue-black overalls with grey hair, and is not a happy man, that's for sure.
Very rare for a Cordes ASP to have an issue like this. Preparation of those cars is absolutely incredible, and clearly from the get-go, obviously Jim Pla was able to get something on the board, but was definitely not fully up to speed, and it's an issue that has prevented Bobelik from doing a time at all.
So the final stream of cars pours over the line. Simon Thurman has already pitted, so in the end 0.6 of a second he was ahead of Erwin Bastard, who was 33 thousandths ahead of Loic Villiger. So a big margin and then a tiny margin. Again, interesting, isn't it, how some persevere right to the very end, others realise that the time isn't there on the data, on the dash in the car, and bring the car in early, whereas others now put effectively a wasted lap because they've gone no quicker and an in lap onto the tyres.
Yeah, and I suppose there is a lot of traffic in this last sector where people are backing up and trying to find track space through the chicane. And so it might be that it's only the final sector where they're losing the time. The first and second sectors are good, so you keep pushing. And then when you make a mistake through Blanchimont or coming out through Stavelot, then the lap time goes, and you then have the opportunity to choose to bail or not.
So the flag is out. The cars making their way then to the pit lane. And at the end of the, what did we get in the end? 14 minutes, really, of running. It is Simon Thurman who is the fastest.
Oh, Lacknau bailed.
Did he, after all that?
I mean, the lap wasn't particularly good, but he's bailed into the pits. He could have finished that lap, and considering how much he bailed out of the final sector, I'm surprised he didn't. But either way, he's in the pit lane, and he will only start 26th.
And interesting that we still haven't seen anything about the lap disappearing, even though that was the one that was on TV. Anyway, it might get looked at post-session. So I think everybody has now taken the flag. The cars for the next activity queuing up at the end of the pit lane. And so good activity, good racing in prospect for GT4 European Series, and the Spa circuit still bathed in sunshine. We are at Spa, aren't we? Yes, yes. Just checking. That new, very imposing grandstand sitting high over Eau Rouge. The temporary grandstands that have been put in during the week. They weren't here, those blue grandstands, for British GT last week. They've morphed into place over the last few days. But it's a very impressive feat of engineering, that grandstand. There it is from another angle. And yesterday, Tyler Cook's Lamborghini arrived at the feet of everybody there because it had a big lose going up through Radion and ended up in the tar barrier. So the cars now queued at the end of the pit lane so they can be brought into the paddock. The GT4 teams in the bottom paddock. I mean, that's another huge operation, the paddock layout here, because you've got so many teams. They all need access to the circuit through different places. They've got all the suppliers' trucks, the tyre trucks, the teams' hospitality, catering areas, you name it. I mean, that's another massive task in itself, getting everybody in the paddock here.
I mean, there is a paddock that's on the exit of Pouin, isn't there?
That's right, yeah.
That they have to use because there's so many support races.
So every bit of available space is used. So let's have a quick look at Q2 then, which confirmed that Simon Thurman was the fastest from Owen Bastard and Loic Villiger. Enzo Gillier, fourth from Will Burns and then Gabriele Piana. Fabien Michel, seventh ahead of Hugo Sassa, Ivan Jacoma, and 10th, Akhil Rabindra, ahead of Robert Concerny, Laurent Hergon, Timon Nabours, Robert Haub, and Gregory Faisal, who drives on his own this weekend. After that, for 16th fastest, the WNS Motorsport Max Kronberg, driven Porsche from Moritz Wiskach, Kenny Heremans and Per Andersson, 19th. Jason Tahincioglu rounding out the top 20. Olivier Hart, the quick Dutch driver, good to have him back. He was 21st. Tim Whale, 25th in the Greystone McLaren, and Konstantin Lachnauer, 26th in the end, as we've been saying, with work to do. And the rest of the field scrolling through, with 51 of them being able to do a time, but as we know, there are others in trouble. So number 80 didn't venture out, 66 didn't go out because of its damage, 87 did but didn't get a time because of its mechanical problems, and 22, Andreas Miles, Porsche Cayman, the 718, is now a 714 at best, I think, because it's somewhat mangled and somewhat shorter than it should have been. So that is the order, and we'll have GT4 racing later on, because the Q1 times determine the race 1 grid, barring any penalties, and they will be on track at 19:50 local time for their race coming up towards the end of the day. So let's turn our attention to the highlights of Q2 for GT4 European Series, with the field set to pour out onto the circuit, with the great mix of the BMWs and Toyotas and McLarens all in the queue. So this was how we looked in the sunshine of Q2. And as the cars blasted out onto the circuit, it was the cars at the head of the queue trying to get some warmth into the tyres that were first up towards the chicane, but it wasn't long before the red flag came out. Andreas Mauer had this huge impact, damaged the front and the back of the car, and it slewed back onto the road with debris and the car itself needing to be moved. Out came the red flag. So it became a 14-minute restart. Loic Villiger had this moment going up through Radion, rattled over the curb in the runoff area, got back onto the circuit. Others went mowing the lawn on the inside, coming down to Speaker's Corner. And those that were really committed on the headlights as much as on the power coming down towards Rouen. The Alpines were looking good, especially 55 of Laurent Hergon, that would end up 12th in the times. But at the end of the session, Konstantin Lachnau took up attention as he strove to try to get the Aston Martin with a lap time that it could keep, so many of them being taken away for track limit offences. Fourth quickest had been Will Burns, but he would drop back before the end of the session. Simon Thurman being the driver that would ultimately take the top time in the Alpine by 0.6 of a second from anybody else. Owen Bastard second and Loic Villiger third. So qualifying done, one race for the cars today, and we look forward to the cars at the end of the day racing into the darkness. Join us for that if you can. For now, from Ben Constanduris and David Addison, it's goodbye.